Hi, it's Michelle and Laura. We often are asked what it is that we do as career coaches, and
Yeah.
it's quite a loaded question. Now, I get a bit nervous when people say, well, what does a career coach actually do? Because, it's not a list of stuff, it's not a checklist and a set of rules and regulations. And yeah, I think it's a good opportunity just to talk a little bit about our approach to it and what it is that we do. Yeah.
Well, I think people come to you and they come from a different point. So it might be that they come and they're looking to change like careers or industries. So that's often one where people come and say, I've been doing this for the last 15, 20 years. I've kind of had enough. I don't really want to progress any further. Where could I take my skills? And I think our background as recruiters and understanding different industries is that we can identify their transferable skills and give them options to consider. But other people come and they might start on a looking for some support, literally with basic things like a resume or LinkedIn profile, or maybe
Selection
value
criteria.
proposition, selection criteria,
Yeah.
and it sort of starts as that point.
Yes.
But then we progress through that, what we call hand-holding, through that journey with them into a new role and considering different options and so on. Or it can be some people come and they just say, I want to stay in my organisation, but I'm not being able to progress to a leadership role, or I'm having problems with my team, or just the professional development things. And I think they come in at the starting point is different, but quite often they aim at that you end up at the same sorts of things that you're talking about.
And sometimes it's really practical, like I want to negotiate a salary in my current organisation, or I'm doing a performance appraisal and I don't know how to put it forward, or whatever the case may be. And I think the issue is that people feel comfortable knowing that you are not an internal person in the organisation, you are not a family member or whatever. You're coming from the basis of, we've spent so much time with hundreds of people talking about avenues to take. And I think that's sometimes what they search for. They search for what else is out there, or what else is the option. And I get the feedback often from clients saying to us, you've opened doors for me that I never thought of before. You've given me an opportunity to look at something that I wouldn't have thought about. So I think that's the one
or maybe
thing.
I've been fearful to go there.
Yes, and then to give them the courage to say, just be a little bit aspirational and go. And it's like having that, and I know we say wing person, it's the wing person that sits there and says, sometimes you just need to talk it through. Sometimes you've had a bad day with people in your leadership team, or sometimes you wobbled a bit because you put in a couple of applications and you haven't heard back. And it's just that soundboard, that person that's, and you know what, I think we do a lot of confidence building by default, because that person plays through scenarios. And there's often situations where you don't talk much, you provoke, and then they talk themselves through that process,
Or
and they
reflect
become
back,
and they become really confident in terms of how it is that they want to articulate that problem that they
Absolutely.
have. So it's an array of things, but I think what develops is the more you spend time with that individual, the more you tap into what they're all about, and that's what they like. They like that familiarity where they go, you know what I'm like, or you know how I think, and often I think they say things to you that they might not discuss with other people as points of concern, or things that they're not confident about. And the two of you just work through that. And I think if you look at the relationships that we've built, it, like you said, it started maybe at my resume doesn't look great, and then we go from there. And I know, like interview preparation, people assume that they can interview, and then they go on interview and go, I don't understand why I didn't get the job. And it's all of that.
Well,
I think it's all the touch
I
points.
think it's also that thing where you're looking as an outsider. If you're not in that particular position of either change or wanting change, you look and say, do people really need a career coach? But when it's you in that situation and you're not confident, and generally those people have been seeking advice from everyone, but they're going around in circles. It's actually just being able to think through those decisions so that you know that you've thought them through properly, and then you're making a decision and you're going to act on that.
Yes, and that to me is the crux of it, is that you can talk a lot and go nowhere, but what we then do as a follow-on, which is important for me, is that I look at a practical application then after that to say, okay, how do we then do this? Because otherwise the talking is something, and I think very often it confuses people more. if they don't understand where the talking is leading. So it's then saying, okay, so now we understand exactly, we framed it, we understand the issue, we understand where it is that you want to go. Now how do we get there? And that's where people start getting really strong. And then when they're in those positions, then you become that soundboard very often to say, I'm now massaging that role and I'm now in that role, but what else can I do? Or am I doing the right thing? Or I've got a relationship issue in the company, or whatever the case might
But that's
be.
a classic example, I think, is when people say, I wanted to change industries, or I want to change what I'm doing, and they sort of have a couple of ideas in mind, but they don't know how to get there. So it's how do you practically get
Exactly
there?
right.
And we make sure that those decisions are thought through. So have you gone and researched this? Have you considered that? Have you spoken to people? You know, there's all sorts of methods that we use, for example, with career change, that we go through to make sure that they've really kind of expanded their brain, thought of everything, and then brought it back, and then how do they kind of work their way through that. But I think the central concept is that you're that independent sounding board who both, you give that and you give the practical how to get there in terms of your career.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think, yeah.
So that's what we do.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that the relationship that you form is the crux of everything, because you don't have a vested interest, or you're not a middleman, or you have no agenda. What your agenda is to say to that individual, we're working with you. The focus is on you, and keep on bringing them back to that, to say what it is that you are after, and then going from there.
And it's interesting, I found maybe 5 years ago, there was a bit of a negative about career coaches. It was a bit like, oh, what are they doing?
That's a bit fluff.
Yeah, and I think that's really changed, that people are like, you know, I spend so much time at work, it's important that I get some enjoyment, and you know, if I'm wanting to build a career, that
I know how to leverage.
I know how to
leverage it.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Good. I hope with that we've clarified that for some people.
Yeah.